Okay, good morning and welcome to the Spring 2020 Social Investors Forum. I'm Alex Eaton. I'm the CEO of the Community Foundation of Utah, and we are a place-based public charity dedicated to improving the lives of people in this great state we call home. At our simplest, we're a true community as a foundation of nearly 200 donor-advised funds. At our most complex, we're much like the finalists you'll hear from today. We're committed to overcoming barriers faced by Utah's social sector through promoting innovation, sustainable funding models, and measurable impact. Since 2008, we've granted over $60 million to our community, with an emphasis on fostering innovation and collaboration, but more importantly, seeking to address our community's most pressing needs. Shay, do you want to run the video? Okay, great. Well, with that, I'd love to turn the time over to Shaylin Barber, who is our Community Initiatives Manager. Shay, take it away.
There we go. Wow, my computer froze for a minute there. We've got to love technology. So I'd like to welcome you to the 11th Social Investors Forum. I'll start by thanking Morgan Stanley for their financial support of this initiative, our esteemed investment committee, our audience, and last but not least, our 6 finalists. The first Social Investors Forum was held in 2014 with the goal of supporting innovation and sustainability in Utah's nonprofit sector. Through this program, the foundation, in collaboration with the investment committee, has awarded nearly $600,000 to organizations that promote social good. As you participate in the event today, we encourage you to take the opportunity to learn about evaluating an organization and strategically directing your funding to make the biggest impact. This is something that we work on every day at the Community Foundation of Utah. You'll have an opportunity at the end of the event to vote for the Audience Choice Award, which the investment committee will take into account as they make their decisions. The 6 pitches you will hear today were selected from a highly competitive pool of applicants. We want to highlight the great things these organizations are doing for our community and encourage you to financially support any of the projects you see as compelling. Whether it is $20 or $20,000, these organizations would all appreciate your support. I would also encourage you to support the Social Investors Forum itself, so we can grow this pool of funding committed to social sector innovation and award more organizations in the future. We always receive more exciting applications than we are able to fund. Each organization will have 4 minutes to make their pitch, followed by 10 minutes of Q&A with the investment committee. Now, I'd like to introduce our first finalist, Sarah Beaumont from the International Rescue Committee.
Shay, can I introduce the investment committee real quick?
Oh, yes, apologies.
No worries. So I'm Ian Shalday. I'm a director at the Community Foundation of Utah. And I just want to do a quick introduction to the investment committee that we have here today. We have a lot of folks who it's their first time on the investment committee. We're very excited to have them. We really try and build a group of committee members who have a great mix and good background in terms of innovation, entrepreneurship, investing, and excellence in the nonprofit sector. I'll do a quick introduction of our 10 investment committee members. First on the list is Jackie Elliott. She's a director at Silicon Valley Bank. Welcome, Jackie. Good to see you. We also have Nick Fritz with us, who's Director of Impact Investing for Intermountain Healthcare. Intermountain's doing some really exciting work on impact investing, and Nick has been heading that up. We also have Kimmy Paluch, who's a managing partner and head coach at Beta Boom, who's an accelerator and funder for minority-led startups. We have Sid Kromenhoek, who's the founder and general partner of Album VC. Sid, welcome. Jeff Stoll, who's the managing director up at Royal Street Ventures up in Park City. Brent Thompson, who's the CEO and co-founder of Blip, and as well as a board member of the Community Foundation of Utah. We have Carol Hollowell, who's the executive director of SwitchPoint Community Resource Center. And Carol and SwitchPoint was actually, they were an awardee of the forum last year and received a $100,000 loan to start up a 24/7 daycare facility down in St. George. Really cool project. We have Kirsty Morris, executive director at Morgan Stanley. So glad you could join us, Kirsty. And again, Morgan Stanley financially supports the program. We really do appreciate that. And our last two are Gary Kennedy, he's a private investor and entrepreneur and has worked at a number of companies, too long to list, but Oracle may be where you might recognize him most prominently. And then John Ballard, who is president of Magic Space Entertainment here in Salt Lake. So welcome everybody. Looking forward to the deliberations afterwards, and I'll kick it back over to Shaylin to get our first pitch started.
All right, our first pitch today is going to be Sarah Beaumont from the International Rescue Committee.
Thank you, Shay, and thanks everyone for this opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So I'm here today to tell you about a new program that the International Rescue Committee is launching. It's a community-based interpretation services program that aims to give all Utahns a voice. This is Rebecca. I met Rebecca on my first day at the IRC. She's my age, a single mother from the Central African Republic. I had signed up to help her get to a doctor's appointment. This appointment had been rescheduled 4 times already because the clinic couldn't provide interpretation. And even that 5th time, I had to advocate for nearly an hour in order to get her a Songo interpreter on the phone. Can you imagine going to a doctor's appointment and not understanding anything they're saying? This is the reality for 5.2% of Utahns, or roughly 125,000 individuals. And this number is poised to grow as our cultural and linguistic diversity continues to increase in Utah. But for these individuals, accessing the most basic services, healthcare, education, employment, it's a struggle that worsens the already strong inequality that they're up against. This coronavirus outbreak has only exacerbated the situation. The Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs reported that lack of adequate interpretation and translation was one of the biggest barriers that immigrants and new Americans faced in this environment. The current market for interpretation services is just not meeting community needs. It's dominated by for-profit organizations that are too expensive. They charge up to $60 for an hour of interpretation. It's a rate that many new Americans just can't afford. And our nonprofits, which provide more affordable services, are just too capacity constrained to meet the needs. At the IRC, we have a 26-year history of helping refugees, asylees, and other new Americans thrive in Utah, and we have been successful awardees of the Social Investors Forum in the past. Also, we benefit from being part of a national network. There are 24 field offices throughout the US, and we share best practices and resources. And this model that we're building is actually based off of a model that is operating efficiently and successfully in 2 other offices in the US. Our solution to this growing demand for language access is a three-pronged community-based approach. First, we will implement new technology that will help improve efficiencies in scheduling and managing interpretation appointments. Second, we will proactively hire and train interpreters, not just on medical interpretation, but also on professional development topics available through the IRC. And third, we will create a suite of marketing assets that will help us engage with community organizations and service providers to inform them of this new resource and help us secure additional recurring revenue contracts. We are respectfully requesting $25,000. This is an increase from the original $15,000 that we had requested, but as you all know, the world is quite different from March 1st. Internally at the IRC, we've seen the demand for interpretation increase 158% in the past 3 months. We anticipate turning a modest profit by year 3, and we will use these funds over the long term to invest in our overall operating budget. This sort of investment will help us mitigate the fluctuations that we face in funding environments. Rebecca has now been in the US for 1.5 years. She still uses our interpretation services to help bridge the gap in critical appointments, but she is increasingly self-sufficient. And with this investment, we can help meet one of the most pressing needs for our new American community and help give all Utahns a voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll move to our Q&A session now. And I believe our first question is from Brent Thompson.
Hi, yeah, thanks. You mentioned some revenue streams that you anticipated in your presentation there. Can you tell us about those?
Sure. So I have some detailed financial projections here. So currently our program is funded through a pool of grant funds as well as one contract with a health insurance provider. Right now it's about a 80-20 split in revenue streams. We anticipate growing our individual contracts through schools, hospitals, courts, and we've reached out to a few of these organizations already, and they've expressed demand in forming contracts. We use fairly conservative assumptions of just adding one half of a contract each year. And then our grant funds, we expect that to be relatively stable. Another new source of revenue that we're pursuing is individual walk-ins. So taking our immigration services, for example, we currently have walk-in hours on Fridays, or we will when we reopen. And each of those individuals that come in, they frequently need interpretation services. And often we're just pulling from staff members who speak these languages, but they don't have the capacity to fill that. So we would like to improve that service offering by offering clients who are coming in the ability to pay for interpretation upfront.
Thank you, Sarah and Brent. Next, we have Kimmy Pallett.
Thank you, and thank you, Sarah, for a great presentation. My first question was answered, but my second would be, how many translators are you hoping to bring on, and how many do you think that will serve in the next year?
Sure. So right now we currently have 2 full-time translators and 3 part-time. We are looking to increase this to double that in size, and we would expect this to help serve not only our current client base of around 2,000 clients and increase that, doubling that over the time period listed here. And I'd also like to mention that my executive director is on the phone as well and can also share her experience in working with this program and being part of the Social Investors Forum in the past.
Yes, I'd be happy to. And I think Sarah did an excellent job of illustrating the need and the demands in the community, especially as we've seen right now. And with that, we would be looking at what the high demand languages are. We already have a pretty good idea, but just based on our current client population, but we have a broader new American population that also struggles to access adequate interpretation within our Brazilian communities and Samoan communities. And so we've targeted, refugee languages, more concertedly, obviously for the purpose and mission of our organization. But there is also appetite in market for a broader language base as well.
Thank you. Next question comes from Nicholas Fritz.
Hi guys, thanks Sarah and Natalie so much. My first two questions were answered already, but I'm curious about how you choose interpreters. It strikes me that members of these communities may be well employed by this program.
Sure. As a community-based organization, we certainly look to build strong relationships with our communities, and our current interpreters are members of the communities who have not only started as interpreters, but really grown to take on other staffed positions here at the IRC. And there's something really valuable about pulling from community members because they understand the experience of what our clients are going through. For example, one of our interpreters right now, Claire, she was resettled by the IRC after the period of being under our case management. She then pursued this opportunity of being an interpreter with us, and she has great relationships within the community. And also somebody who has the willingness to learn, translation and interpretation is a special skill, so we do offer training to help build that competency, but it's someone who's really interested in giving back to their community.
I would just also add to that, one advantage that we have at the IRC is that our interpreters are paid staff members. They are not just contract interpreters, so they are eligible for fringe benefits, which is an attractive incentive for employees. But also the IRC has several different professional development opportunities through LinkedIn Learning and Kaya and an employee assistance program that assists with all types of different resources that community members need. And so there's a whole benefits package that goes along with being with an interpreter with the IRC as well.
Perfect, thank you so much.
Our next question comes from Carol Hollowell.
Hi, and great job, Sarah. My question was on the financials as well, and being in the nonprofit world, I'm super concerned about special session coming up here. Have you thought about what's really going to happen to those grant dollars, and have you heard anything about the grant dollars that you're getting would be put on the chopping block with some of the other funding that comes from the state?
Sure. One benefit that we have is that we have quite a diverse pool of funding streams. Yes, the state and federal government levels are still the primary source of funding, but we are increasingly diversifying and receiving more corporate funding, more unrestricted donations. And so this will help us weather some of those cuts that are being proposed. Natalie, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add on that point.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had our, crystal ball, as we all do, that we would know a little bit more in terms of what those cuts would look like. We've not received any, official notices as of yet. But as Sarah said, we do have a diverse funding pool, and I think that kind of highlights the need for creating new revenue streams that can come into our organization to help sustain, particularly those operating costs that are pretty limited within the government and other funding streams that we currently receive, with gaps that we typically have to fill through unrestricted funding. So that is one of kind of a strong motivation for identifying new revenue streams that can come into the organization, such as the interpretation program.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful. I believe that's all of the questions that we have from the judges, but I do have a question from the audience. And they are wondering, is the current contract secured income, and have you tested the assumptions on future contract income?
So the current contract is based off of a reimbursement, and it's with an insurance provider, and we do have, I believe, 3 years of history of working with this insurance provider and have seen a pretty steady flow. It's based off of healthcare appointments that we provide for our clients, that we assist our clients in getting to. And we have a pretty fair understanding of what those volumes will be. In terms of other contracts, we are certainly looking at the market opportunity there and estimating what that flow would be and what the revenue levels could be. And we're using fairly conservative assumptions in our model to help us just achieve break even or a small profit.
Thank you. And it does look like we have one more question from John Ballard.
Hello, I'm curious, what languages do you cover now, and which languages that you don't cover are the most important that you do cover with new interpreters?
Sure. The current languages that we do cover now are Kinyarwanda, Kiswahili, Burmese. We do have some French and Spanish speakers on staff, but not a specific interpreter for them. Sango, Nepali. The languages that are most in demand, I would say, would be Spanish and Arabic. And again, we have staff members who speak these languages, but they have other focus areas. They're executing direct service and programs. And so we don't want to take away from that. And I think those would be our first two hires, as well as probably an additional Kiswahili speaker, because that's a fairly high demand area.
And I would just add Somali as one of those languages as well.
Great.
All right, thank you. We're nearing the 10-minute mark for our Q&A, so I don't believe we have time for more questions at this time. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Right, and next up, we'll have Alex Lundy from Flourish Ventures.
Hello, thank you. Thanks to everyone. All right. Hello, my name is Alex Lundy, and I'm the Director of Development.
And I am Amy Altizer, the Executive Director of Flourish Ventures, a Utah-based nonprofit with a serving individuals with a history of incarceration and substance use disorders.
We exist because of the issues of mass incarceration and substance abuse in the state of Utah. Statistics show that the issues of mass incarceration and substance use disorder are prevalent in our community. And in fact, individuals with a history of incarceration and substance use disorder often relapse and end up back in prison over and over again. Flourish Ventures aims to break that cycle of relapse and recidivism through culinary training and vocational rehabilitation. Over the course of 12 months, our interns worked their way through a variety of modules designed to set them up for a successful career in the culinary field. During that year, we also prioritized health and well-being, as well as promoting peer support and community interaction in the community. Once their internship is over, they go on to complete a 3-month externship with one of our community partners in one of the premier kitchens in the Salt Lake area. And throughout it all, we pay our interns $12 an hour, a living wage for Utah and for the nation. By focusing then on accountability, opportunity, and hope, we are able to provide our interns with a real chance at a second chance in their lives. In fact, not since the early development of our program have we had an intern relapse, and no intern has had new charges. And we firmly believe that this success is directly connected to the success of our social enterprise, Flourish Bakery. In fact, last year, we were a finalist with the Social Investors Forum, and while we did not receive seed funding for our food truck project, we went ahead and moved forward with that project anyway. As a direct result of that, we saw a 60% increase in our generated revenue the following quarter, and simultaneously paved the way for additional intern training opportunities. This year, what we're asking for is $25,000 to expand our branded wholesale branch of Flourish Bakery. Our analyses show that the opportunity for turning a profit and our opportunity to scale is very high. with this particular branch. But we currently don't have the capacity to move forward beyond the current 2 accounts that we have. With this funding, we would be able to purchase an automated sealer and a delivery vehicle, as well as outfit that delivery vehicle with refrigeration and structural upgrades, thereby ensuring that our products can travel through Salt Lake and Utah counties safely to our customers. With additional mentorship, we do believe that this can be a lucrative and a significant piece of our social enterprise. And not only through turning a profit, but also providing real opportunities for more interns and breaking that cycle of relapse and recidivism in our community. So if you have any questions on our proposal or innovation in our model, particularly in light of COVID-19, we would welcome those. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Our first question comes from Sid Cromenhook.
Yeah, Alex and Amy, thank you so much. Really appreciate your presentation and what you're doing. Can you talk a little bit more about, you mentioned, relapse, and kind of speaking to recidivism, like what numbers have gone through the program and how much time do they have under their belt so far? Can you just elaborate a little bit further?
Absolutely. Are you looking specifically for percentages of relapse and recidivism, or the number of individuals that have come through the program?
How many people have gone through the program? Yeah, and like even your first cohort, if you could say, hey, our first cohort was from this year. For now 3 years, they've not only been clean, but they're working at these jobs. Just to give us a little more color into some of the quantity, and time that's lapsed since your first cohort.
Absolutely. Thank you. Amy, do you want to speak a little bit on that?
Sure. So thank you for that question. Our first cohort started with 5 individuals in January 2nd of 2018. Of that, 2 of our graduates are presently working professionally in the local area industries and have gone on to further education through GEDs and taking additional vocational and skills training. The first cohort in 2018 had 2 individuals who experienced relapse early on within the first 3 to 4 months of the program. Since then, we have gone ahead and bolstered community and peer support training, bringing in more support for our individuals in early recovery. The individuals who have succeeded and graduated through that first year's programming have over 2 years of time of what they would say staying clean, or what we frequently know as being sober, celebrating some really great anniversaries and some exceptional continued growth in their lives.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question comes from Brent Thompson.
Hi, thanks, guys. Quick question about your capacity. So the expansion that you anticipate by receiving investment and getting the sealer and the rest of that stuff, what does that do to your bottom line? And what does that do to the number of people that you can serve?
Can you repeat the question? I had a little bit of difficulty hearing that last bit.
Yeah, no problem. So I expect that, if you receive an investment here, that it's going to increase your capacity in 2 areas. The first is, financially, what does this do for your finances if you have another product line, another offering for your customers? And the second is, what does it do for your capacity to run interns through the program?
Sure.
So what does it do for your financial situation, and what does it do for your capacity for serving?
Perfect. So we really believe that our financial capacity will be bolstered significantly. I believe that we'll actually have a 200% growth over our current revenue streams coming from our catering, from our food truck, from any kind of online shopping. So the investment here would significantly bolster us. I do believe, hopefully, from 10% of our overall budget to close to 20% over the next year. With regards to the operational capacity, having the additional production and consistency in production means that we'll have work generally for the interns to do. So I believe that we can hire on 2 to 3 more interns with this production capacity, and then offset their wages with the additional revenue gain.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Nicholas Fritz.
Hi guys, thanks so much. You mentioned COVID, so let's dive into that. How have you adapted to this current environment? And if we stay in this environment for another 6 months or a year, does that affect your ability to be able to scale in the way that you're talking about?
Absolutely. So I think it's worthwhile to just show you. We put out this strategic response plan about 2 weeks ago to the general public, 3 weeks ago to our donor base. What we've really done since COVID hit is nothing but pivot. About 3 weeks after we took a break, after 3 weeks after suspending normal operations, we resumed limited operations in our kitchen space. And we have since then actually seen significant profit margins and revenue generated since the beginning of the year. As a matter of fact, even with COVID, we have seen a 78% of where we were last year already recovered in our revenue streams. And 95% of that recovery has happened in the last 2 months. So it seems to me that our current capacity is doing just fine. That said, what I would like to say is that we know that we'll have challenges with expanding our branded wholesale. One of our markets certainly were wellness cafes in major businesses and corps around the. We anticipate that we'll see some decline in that. But there are a number of studies showing actually that people will continue to work in their office spaces 2 to 3 times a week. So we don't anticipate that it will hurt us too much with the expansion. If we do see a slow, I would imagine that it would be recovered in an additional 3 months. So a 15-month expansion rather than a 12-month expansion.
Thank you.
All right, the next question is from Gary Kennedy.
Thanks for your presentation. You mentioned early on that only 11% of the inmates receive addiction treatment, and of course that explains the high rate of recidivism. I wanted to know if you're providing any treatment for addiction to the people who are to the interns who are participating in your program.
That's a great question, Gary. Thank you for that. So the way that we kind of work with that, we have obviously a number of community partners in the area, and those community partners are anywhere from transitional housing and halfway houses to doing fitness programs, recovery-focused fitness programs. We also have mental health resources that we partner with. But I think the biggest part of that is actually peer support. We are very intentional with our hiring to ensure that individuals who work for us have had success in their recovery and are on the path for long-term recovery. So having that peer support really makes a difference for our interns and provides a model for their own path. Sorry, Gary.
That kind of sounded like a no, that you don't actually provide treatments for addiction. I mean, of course, peer support's important, but they could get that in prison or a number of other places. Do you have any plans to add some more formal addiction training?
Gary, my name is Amy. And to answer your question, we do not provide treatment like inpatient treatment would, where there's 60 to 90 days of treatment in an intensive unit. We provide the aftercare of that, which helps individuals stabilize and cross that bridge back into societal life, utilizing the skills that they gained while they were in inpatient treatment. And we do that through providing a network of partners with either health, fitness, counseling, peer support, recovery groups, and we work very closely with organizations like Odyssey House, who have continued aftercare for individuals who have come through residential or outpatient treatment. What was missing after residential and outpatient treatment was that bridge back into a community and societal life that is what you and I might think of as normal life. And that's where we saw a lot of individuals that fell off of recovery and relapsed or recidivated. And so that's the need that we fill as an organization, is to help individuals build and cross that bridge for themselves into community to live a long-term recovery after residential or outpatient treatment.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is all of the questions that we have time for. But thank you so much for your presentation. All right, our next presenter will be the Green Urban Lunchbox with Katie Nelson.
Sharing. Is it not? Hang on one moment, please.
We can see your presentation if that's what you're wondering.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Great, well, greetings. Hi, my name is Katie Nelson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Green Urban Lunchbox. Next. The average age of the Utah farmer is 58 years old. That's 7 years from retirement. In the past 150 years, we've lost half of the Earth's topsoil resources to industrialized agriculture and over-tillage. If we continue these practices in another 60 years, all of our topsoil will be completely gone. What are we going to do when that time comes? As consumers, we have lost our connection to the food that we eat and to the land that it is grown on. Imagine this, in 1 teaspoon of soil, there are more microorganisms living in it than there are people living on this planet today. There's a revival in regenerative agriculture, and it's sweeping the nation, and it's happening here in our community on our farm in South Salt Lake City. Regenerative agriculture actually builds and grows soil rather than depleting it. So it utilizes these skills such as compost tea, cover cropping, and no-till farming. Last year on our farm, we converted a third of it to no-till farming. This means that our farm acts as a carbon sink, so it stores carbon rather than releasing it into the atmosphere, and we think that that's really cool. In our Small Farms Initiative, we are actively training the next generation of farmers these skills and techniques in regenerative agriculture. Today, we're asking for your help in the form of a mentorship. We've come to a phase in our Small Farm Initiative where we're sort of turning our wheels in the soil, and we need your help getting unstuck so that we can amplify this program and serve our community much more than we are. This program costs us about $70,000 a year to operate annually, and most of the expenses are staffing and supplies. This year in 2020, we are about 50% self-funded in this program through sales in our community-supported agriculture. We see these sales increasing next year in 2021 through increased sales in our community-supported agriculture, as well as our free farm stands. Our Small Farm Initiative has evolved over the years. It first began as an incubator farm, and it has transformed into this learning farm collective, and that's where we are at today. In 2018, we recognized we had really high dropout rates in our farmers, and so we pivoted at that time. We shortened the length of this program, and then we began to collectively farm, thinking and hoping that we would support our farmers a little bit more. And it turns out we did. In 2019, we had a 100% graduation rate, which was really awesome. In 2020, we struggled to recruit new farmers, and that's why we're here asking for your help. Additionally, in 2014, the first year that this forum happened, our founder, Sean Peterson, pitched at this forum, and you invested in our fruit share program. This program is still operating today, and we're still finding creative solutions to eliminating food waste and while addressing food insecurity. So time is ticking and action needs to happen now. We believe that by teaching people skills in regenerative agriculture, we can begin to change the course of our future. So we're asking for your support in helping us figure out and amplify this program so that we can teach new farmers of a younger generation. We're looking for a mentorship that is fluid and flexible, and somebody that has the skills to help us amplify this program, make it more attractive, make it more educational and more financially sustainable. We see a future that really doesn't deplete the Earth's natural resources. That's why we're here. Please support us and join us in creating a more sustainable future for the future generations. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Katie. We'll move on now to the Q&A portion of this presentation. And our first question is from Nicholas Fritz.
Hi, Katie. Thank you so much. Can you just give a little more color on kind of what the programming looks like for farmers and what the kind of course of study, I guess, is?
Sure, definitely. So this course, it runs for about 8.5 months. So it begins in mid-February and runs through the course of a growing season so that our farmers can really experience what a full season of growing food looks like. It includes 2 classes per week that include different topics on how to grow food. So we cover topics that include regenerative agriculture techniques. And then we also introduce people into different techniques and ideas and trying to develop their own philosophy, I suppose, and how they want to grow food for their customers. We also include a track that supports them in learning business skills so that they can eventually start their own farming business. Thank you for your question.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah.
This is from Brent Thompson.
Hey, Katie, thanks for your presentation. Quickly, what are the alternative approaches to solving soil stabilization, and how did you arrive at that as the solution that you're pursuing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there are lots of other solutions, and I think we came to this particular one listening to some other farmers in California doing these no-till farming techniques and practices and learning about their ability to actually grow the soil biology and the microorganisms living in their soil just by growing food intensively. And so we believe that this is a really interesting and cool technique that people can adopt on a small scale, and they can do it in urban environments. And we believe that part of our mission is revitalizing urban spaces, and in doing this, we can create something beautiful while growing food that will feed our community at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from Sid Kromenhoek.
Hey, Katie, thank you for your presentation and appreciate your energy. Can you share and just paint the picture for those of us like me who might be dense as to like what does a modern farmer look like? Or like, in other words, is this more of, hey, this is something that individual families find like makes, life and learning a little bit more enjoyable for them? Maybe some of their neighbors. Is this like, no, like who is the typical farmer that you serve, yeah, like what? I guess I just can't. I don't fully understand that. Can you share some anecdotes and like what would be the typical scenario that would come through your program?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for your question, Sid. So historically, we've taught people who are interested in learning how to farm, and they're generally of a younger generation. So this could range anywhere from 18 years old to about 38. And so I believe and am seeing that sort of this new small scale farming that's really reviving in our community and across the country are sort of these younger farmers who are really interested in growing food that's more sustainable or more sustainably and organically, or no spray, or just using things that are more beneficial to our environment, and then again also to the food that we eat. So they're growing nutritious food that's grown hyper locally, and they're feeding people locally as well. And so that's sort of how I kind of see this new farmer, and these are the farmers that we see coming through our program.
One more question to that. So is this like something I just do in the evenings in addition to my job? Is this like supplementing my income? Is this full-time employment? Like, practically speaking, in addition to just a better way to come by food that's better for the environment, like what practically is it for these people in the way of employment?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And that's something that I think that we need help determining. Historically, we've had classes in the evening. So many of our farmers work a full-time job, and then they come out to our classes. And then we do about 10 hours of hands-on learning on our farm. So we see it as being about a 13-hour-a-week commitment. And so on top of a 40-hour-a-week job, that's a lot going on. So that's kind of how that program is structured, and we're kind of looking at new ways to make it more accessible to people. So we've thrown out this idea of potentially splitting it up into 3 10-week sessions that are that intensive, and people can kind of pick and choose when they do that intensive time. So yeah, I hope that answers your question a little bit more. I think we're really open to trying new things so that we can be a little bit more marketable, so people are more interested in it. And I think the people, when they're finished, the farmers, when they're finished with their program as well, they can either go either way, full-time farmer, or kind of doing something on the side and selling food or offering it to their friends. So it could be a small side hustle, or it could be a career, a launching for their career.
Got it. Thank you, Katie.
Next question comes from Gary Kennedy.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. Can you give us a sense of how much lower, I'm assuming they are lower, the yields are on these sustainable farms than normal farming? Because obviously, if the yields were higher, you'd have an easy sell, and the world would be doing it. But yields are probably lower, and there are good reasons to do what you're doing, even if yields are lower. But can you give us a sense of how much impact it would have on a farmer?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are a lot of elements that are at work in that question. I think that from research that we've seen and farmers that we're following that are doing sort of this no-till agriculture, they're seeing an increase in production. So they're growing larger amounts of food on smaller amounts of land. So intensive agriculture, sort of, if you can imagine this, it spreads out the rows, right? You have an acre of land and you're only growing so much because the food needs to be grown farther apart. And so in this intensive agriculture, you can actually condense that acre down into something much smaller. And so you're intensively growing this food using practices such as vertical scale gardening. So you can trellis your crops, so you're getting more packed in. So I think that this solution starts at small scale. However, there are a lot of people in the Midwest who are beginning to think about turning farmland into rangeland and bringing the cows to the rangeland. And in that way, they're building that soil. They're still growing cattle to feed people, but they're not necessarily over-tilling the soil and depleting the soil resources there. So it's a big idea, and I think it'll start small, and it's also happening on larger scales in different areas of our country. Thank you for your question, Gary. I hope that answers it.
The next question will come from John Ballard.
Hi, I love your program. It sounds like a wonderful thing to be doing. I'm curious, how many interns do you have in your program and how do you reach them? And second question is, where are these farms? Are they in backyards or community gardens, or do big farms allow people to rent some space?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So our farm is located in Salt Lake City, or South Salt Lake, and we farm on land from the Salt Lake County. We're part of the urban agriculture program. So that's where our land comes from. And initially when we started this program, it was an incubator program. So farmers who needed access to land could farm on our farm, and they had sort of like a 1/16 of an acre to an 1/8 of an acre, and they could grow food on that so that they could jumpstart their business. So that's sort of where our land comes from. And then there's our other opportunities through Salt Lake County Urban Agriculture Program for farmers to have. There are a lot of creative solutions here in our urban environment. There are people are farming in people's backyards. Our Back Farms program, we farm in the backyards of senior citizens to grow food for senior centers. So I think that we are looking for someone to help us answer some of those questions too, to get creative about finding solutions to this program. And so in 2019, we had 3 farmers sign up for our program. And that was the year that we had all 3 of them finish the program. We also ran an internship program, and we had 10 interns on our program. So we had about 13 people learning about regenerative agriculture on our farm. And that's sort of where we need the support, is trying to find new ways to market it and to find these people who are interested in this, and maybe they just don't know that we exist, or they're looking for a new creative way to connect to that desire that they have.
So in 2019, you had 13 people in the program. How did they find out about the program? How did they get interested?
Yeah, so we do a lot of marketing on Facebook and Instagram, and then word of mouth is also really big for us. So I think those were the main ways, after talking to our farmers and interns, is that's how they heard about us.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, that is all the time that we have for Q&A, and we'll move on to our next presenter now. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you.
All right, our next presenter is going to be Tim Jackson from the United Way.
Okay, and I'm just going to get my screen shared here. Okay, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to present on the nonprofit connection. Nonprofit organizations address critical community needs. Unfortunately, many never advance from good to great. This is largely attributed to human capital in nonprofits being under-resourced. With funding sources that see infrastructural and operational expenses as overhead, nonprofits are expected to deliver great outcomes on incredibly lean budgets. Without sufficient professional staff to support operations and administration, we see high levels of burnout and turnover. In the past 3 years, we have seen executive leadership turnover in 12 of our most established community nonprofits just here in Ogden. This leads to organizational instability, has a detrimental impact on service quality, hinders innovation, and prevents them from moving from good to great. Through community conversations and surveys, we have received feedback from over 40 area nonprofits, and the demand is clear. It has surfaced nonprofits' 10 top areas of need, with information technology, leadership and management, and board governance rising to the top. Our solution to support the over 200 area nonprofits is the creation of the Nonprofit Connection, a capability building center that will provide infrastructural support and allow organizations to focus their efforts on their missions, what they do best. Our model, based upon the work of the United Way of Greater Houston and the Taproot Foundation in San Francisco, is tried, tested, and lean. It has minimal paid staff, takes advantage of economies of scale, and systematically leverages the expertise of skilled community professionals. The Nonprofit Connection will build organizational capacity through a tiered service model that includes low-touch supports such as trainings, the sharing of valuable tools, and access to preferred vendors, and more importantly, to high-touch supports, including targeted assessments and intensive coaching. We are deliberately building upon existing community assets that do elements of this work. During the question period, I'd be happy to share more details on the model and our early successes. Oh, my slide deck isn't loading. Can you guys see it?
No, we can't.
Okay, that's bizarre.
There it is.
Okay. I don't know if I skipped a slide. Okay, it did skip a slide, but that's okay. The right team. United Way is one of the most recognized and trusted brands worldwide. We have over 60 years serving Northern Utah and more than 3,500 donors, 5,500 volunteers, and 90 corporate partners who come together to support the nonprofit community. Through our deep connections with both the corporate and nonprofit sectors, United Way of Northern Utah is uniquely positioned to address this need. We have our house in order and a team of professionals with the vision, connections, and capability to deliver on our tiered support model. A local business leader and serial entrepreneur, Alan Hall, has helped us develop the concept, offering consulting services for executive coaching, and is committed to be the first dollar in while challenging us to gather further support. Today, our request is twofold. First, we are requesting one-time funding of $50,000, a catalytic investment to support the hiring of the Nonprofit Connection Center Director and bringing on 4 AmeriCorps Vistas. Second, we are requesting your mentorship and coaching as we approach new corporate partners to secure volunteers to share their expertise pro bono and advance their corporate citizenship. Revenue will be derived from multiple sources. With your support, we will prove the concept, which will open up additional funding opportunities to sustain our work, which I am happy to expound on in the Q&A. In closing, Catherine Schweitzer, a known marathon runner and author, once said that talent and capability exist everywhere. All they need is opportunity. I'm asking you to join with us to lift up the nonprofit sector in Northern Utah. Thank you. My colleague Kate Bedeau is on the call as well, and we're happy to take any questions. And I apologize for the challenges with my slide deck. There were about 4 slides there that I was unable to share.
Great, thank you so much, Tim. We're going to move on now to the Q&A portion. And our first question comes from Jeff Stowell.
Hey, Tim, how are you? Thank you for your presentation. And I like this idea. I'm curious, could you expound a little bit on the way that you are planning to address some of these needs? Because it seems to me, and I'll use the quote or paraphrase the quote you just used, there's a bunch of people that fall or just literally just collapse. Their good idea collapses under the weight of the sort of administrative burden of being a nonprofit organization. United Way is across the world is highly skilled at being a nonprofit organization. How much of this stuff are you just going to do for people to sort of avoid the idea that we've got to, recreate the wheel every single time we have a good charitable idea, versus how much are you going to try and teach and coach up?
So it's really focused on the teaching and coaching up piece. I mentioned we have over 200 area nonprofits. I mean, if you actually looked at the numbers of 501c3s on the books, there's a lot more, but there's so many organizations that are barely established. And I thought, it happened in the Great Recession, and it'll likely happen again, as it kind of, at times of recession, oftentimes kind of separates the wheat from the chaff in terms of organizations that are good ideas, but really don't have the capability to live out their mission. And in many cases, there's already an organization that's doing that it makes more sense for them to support. And so you have to kind of separate the organizations into where they're at. Like, are they filling a unique community need? Is there a demand for it? Do they have enough pieces in play for us to invest our time and energy into them? And so we've got a tiered model, which is universal services. So that would be like webinars and trainings. Like a good example is recently we did a webinar with Zions Bank on the payroll protection program to be able to facilitate them quickly getting access to that information and supporting them in applying. That's universal, and anybody can tap into that and use that. To then having more targeted and more really like honing in on the specific needs of key organizations. And that's where I think it's unique from other services that do exist in the community. That kind of low touch, universal access is more available than really the individual level coaching, where an organization really has poor infrastructure in terms of their information technology or their human resources. And if we can bring a consultant in and do an organizational assessment and help them to understand where their challenges are and, you know, what opportunities exist, what, you know, what great looks like, then there's a lot of opportunity there to help them to fulfill their mission. But we're not going to just do that for them. And so for the more targeted services, we'll have an application, and it'll be, you know, there has to be significant skin in the game and a desire to improve, you know, by the organization.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. Our next question is from Gary Kennedy.
Hi, can you tell us how much of the money you receive goes to administrative overhead versus actually is given to the organizations that you represent?
Sure. So our one of, you know, United Way's historical roles is raising money through the workplace campaign. I believe that's what you're alluding to, where we secure money through a lot of corporate partners that then can donate directly to the organization of their choice. And our overhead rate associated with that is 7.1%. And so that's associated with all of our expenses, you know, our resource development, our marketing, all of the back office managing of those products. But oftentimes we, you know, when possible, we don't charge overhead. So a good example is during COVID, we've raised a COVID fund where we're making distributions to community partners, and we're taking no overhead on that. And so.
Okay, thank you.
And Tim, may I add as well that of the nonprofits that we serve and the surveys that we've distributed, that more than 50% are spending less than 10% on their overhead cost as well.
Thank you.
Great.
Question comes from Nicholas Fritz.
Thanks so much for the presentation, Tim. I actually just already had my question answered, so I'm good. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. Kathy Elliott.
Yeah, so you mentioned, and thanks for your presentation, you mentioned that you're modeling this after another region who's kind of put something in place. Can you talk about how it has impacted their region and the nonprofits in their region?
Sure. So we took a trip, a team of us, to United Way of Greater Houston, and they actually began their nonprofit connection in, I think it was 1992. So they have been well established. And it's become a huge part of what they do as an organization. Actually, when they ended up rebuilding their facility, they ended up building an entire center where they have lots of training rooms where they bring in community partners. They do a lot of bringing together of affinity groups like executive directors or development directors or event managers to support them with training. And they have a very lean staff. They really depend on pro bono consultants in the community to come in and provide both the trainings as well as connecting them with individual organizations to support them. United Ways oftentimes will help corporations connect with nonprofits by helping them to serve on a nonprofit's board of directors. We also engage a lot of corporate folks in terms of, you know, handing out food bags or helping with a cleanup project. But what they've done a great job in doing is really pairing the skills of the corporate, you know, not only executives, but also mid-level managers with the needs of community organizations. And so they have really opened their playbook for us and said that they would help us in any way that they could. Also, the Taproot Foundation, which I mentioned, which is based in San Francisco, it really is focusing on exclusively that piece. I talked about the tiered model, but it's specifically that piece of pairing individual, you know, corporate leaders with individual needs of organizations. And on my team, I have a former executive director who often used that organization when she was in California and is intimately familiar with it, that's helping us to integrate that component.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Yeah, next question comes from Brent Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, for the presentation. So how much of the program that you're proposing is tools versus training? And could you supplement the lack of skills or the human training with effective tools?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, I mean, an example would be, you know, in terms of supporting organizations with their human resources, right? There's things that they'll need to know, right, around HR law and being able to have a good employee handbook. But there's a lot of things that can be provided to them at a low cost that will support them in really advancing their HR systems. And so one example would be having a vendor that helps to manage all of their benefits, where it's a self-serve, you know, system, and individuals can go in and they can manage their benefits, and it's not, you know, paper and pencil with lots of paper that's taking the time of an individual staff person. As well as, I had another example pertaining to HR. So in each of those 10 buckets, there are specific tools. And, you know, another one would be board governance. We rely on BoardSource, which is a preeminent, you know, organization in terms of providing best practices around boards, which organizations don't have access to, but we can provide access to. Another would be survey tools, right? Like Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey, being able to bring that tool in as an economy of scale. There's a number of tools. Sorry, Grant, I see you have another question.
Yeah. Back to Gary's question, like a lot of that stuff, like the HR and things like that, like, aren't you guys just in a good position to simply be an outsourced partner for some of these organizations? I mean, like Gary said, you are an exceptional example of an administrative nonprofit where you have figured out how to do this at scale. Wouldn't you be in an ideal position to simply provide that service rather than trying to teach every nonprofit how to do HR?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, while we, you know the best practices and are implementing them, in many cases, there are actually others that know it even better. And so, for example, we rely heavily on the Employers Council, which is a nonprofit based in Denver, Colorado, that has offices in Salt Lake, that has a team of HR experts and HR attorneys, and their pricing model is very affordable, and it gives people access to any HR needs they have when they need them. And so we have identified other supports, other community organizations in some of these areas where they'll get what they need, and I guess the best way, you know, possible, where you would actually have an HR expert come in and do they do a spot check and analyze all of the HR systems and then identify their weaknesses and help them through it. And so we do have the ability and have talked a lot about building the capacity in certain areas. One of them is particularly around fundraising, because, you know, we've long had our Zeta Haas Grant Center where we support with grant trainings and help with some development, but really providing more intensive coaching. And so HR would be a potential scenario where at some point it might make sense. You know, normally an HR professional matches up with 100 employees. And so we could consider hiring an HR professional that would support, you know, 12 different organizations. But at this point in our work, as we're catalyzing it, you know, it's easier to rely on, for example, the Employers Council, where we can do it organization by organization as we incrementally have the funding to support it. But yeah, that's very true. And Kate, I don't know if you'd like to add something.
I would. There's a couple of things I'd like to add. First of all, United Way, that is actually in our model. And when we look at the tiered model and the tiered system, when you get up to more the target and the intensive supports that we provide, we have provided fiscal agency for grants and applications and those kinds of things. And that's something that, as we started just recently with this connection center, we moved into that pretty quickly. That became a need that was rarely apparent, exactly what you said. Can we just provide those services for these smaller organizations that don't have the actual staffing to do that? So we've created this, it's a phased model, and what Tim is talking about now and the questions that you asked are in phase 2. In phase 1 of the model, what we want to do is really catalyzing this, what we've started, and launching it. That's why we've included an AmeriCorps Vista system, because through an AmeriCorps Vista program, we're able to actually provide some volunteerism. It's a paid program, but we're actually able to deploy that group of people into our community, into the nonprofits in a very cost-effective manner. And so one of the things that we would be asking is if we are deploying Vista to maybe assist with marketing or IT, that we have a professional in our community that can guide our Vista as well. And so that is part of our model. We've been doing a lot of that just on a case-by-case basis, but phase 2, phase 3 will definitely include more of that.
Thank you so much. That is all the time we have for questions. And thank you so much for Tim and Kathleen for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Right, up next we have Zoe Flavin from Planned Parenthood Association of Utah.
Hello, good morning. My name is Zoe Flavin and I'm the Education Manager with Planned Parenthood Association of Utah. I am looking forward to pitching on behalf of our organization today. Can everyone see my screen? Awesome, I'll get started. What is pubic hair? Is it normal to have a crush on a best friend? In our puberty education classes, we get questions like these all the time, and we know how to answer them. Comprehensive puberty education is not taught in Utah schools, though. This means that the over 190,000 youth ages 10 to 14 in Utah often don't get answers to these commonly asked puberty questions. As sex educators, we also know that parents are often the primary sex educators for their children. Without the facts and appropriate strategies, it can be difficult for parents to bridge the awkward divide and connect to their children about puberty and all the changes that come with it. We propose a multi-platform website devoted to getting comprehensive puberty education to youth and their families. COVID-19 pushed a lot of our education programming online, helping us realize how effective the virtual space can be in meeting families where they're at. We've also found that there's a digital divide. Not all families have access to digital content. Thus, we'll use revenues from this site to support our in-person education programs. Unlike the classroom setting, this platform will be individualized to each child's gender identity, language, cultural background, ability, pop culture interests, and more. The app will have opportunities for parents and children to engage with one another and provide strategies for those tough and sometimes awkward conversations that puberty brings. Since we have expertise in content and pedagogy, the primary costs will be in app and web development. We anticipate revenue coming from microtransactions, ad revenue, and virtual class bookings. We believe that Planned Parenthood Association of Utah is the right team to take this on because our education team has developed expertise in teaching comprehensive puberty education that links families and teens and is inclusive to all identities. We're the predominant group in the sex education space, both in Utah and nationwide. We're a trusted healthcare provider with a national network that will allow for expansion and the additional revenue that comes with it. As part of the National Planned Parenthood Network, we've been involved in rollouts of apps such as Rue, a sex education chatbot. This app has had over 40,000 users in Utah alone since launching a year and a half ago, and 5 million users nationwide. Our team has shown that we have the capacity and expertise to engage users in a sex education app in Utah. With good people, we found a tech partner who can now help us create family-focused curricula. Our ask is an investment of $70,000 over 3 years. The investment will be front-loaded in the first year and decrease as revenue increases. With this investment, we'll be able to capitalize on this historic moment of COVID-19 to improve how puberty education is taught in Utah and beyond. Thank you so much for considering us. We're excited to answer any questions that you have. Annabelle Scheinberg, our VP of External Affairs, will be joining for the Q&A portion.
Great, thank you. We'll be moving now to the Q&A portion, and our first question comes from Sid Kromenhoek.
Hey Zoe, thank you so much. Question: how do you face one, and if so, how do you combat large groups, religious or otherwise, who kind of come at you, squash some of this, for no knock on religion, but it has played an adversarial role as it relates to things that have historically been taboo, and that increasingly we find, addressing it in ways and through organizations like yours, of course, can be really helpful. But do you face that in Utah? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Of course, I'm really glad you asked this question because it is one that comes up a lot in Utah. I think I'll take you to one of our supplemental slides. We recently did a survey of Utahns on whether they support sex education. And we did this in partnership with the ACLU and different organizations. And we found that there was actually a really high rate of support for medically accurate sex education in schools. So it was 65% of Utahns, 75% of unaffiliated voters, which is the largest group of voters in Utah, 93% of Democrats, 43% of Republicans. And we found that people wanted a lot of topics covered, so much more than is typically covered in Utah schools. So what we found is that the desire for this education and knowledge is actually much higher than might be represented in schools and in some of the dominant narratives in Utah. We also have partners in communities across the state. So we partner with an Instagram influencer who identifies as LDS, and we've worked together in kind of sharing knowledge throughout communities in Utah. Annabelle, would you like to add anything to that?
And if I can,
Yeah.
just that's super helpful, but let me interject. This doesn't surprise me at the individual level. What I'm saying is, what do you do with the LDS Church when they come, or a large organization that kind of wields a different level of authority? And again, this is not meant to be critical. I'm LDS, but does that ever happen where organizations may be kind of riding at a stratosphere different than the individuals? In other words, Utah has a history of organizations disproportionately lobbying groups that have a bigger mic with politicians and other things. Like, do you have to combat any of that, or no? Am I thinking too hard?
I can help there, Zoe. So I guess what I would say is this is a mobile-enabled web app. So this is really bringing it to individuals. And this will allow people, we know that puberty education is something people want. So I think to the extent that it's on our website, or that it's a website we're offering, we're less concerned about any large group opposition. And I think that people do decide for themselves with most, day-to-day behaviors. And what we know is that people want sex education. So while I think that dynamic is there, I think if we make it user-centered, relevant to our population and hopefully beyond, we will have a product that's very in demand.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add to that, just looking at this slide with the Rue chatbot, we had over 40,000 users from Utah using the bot that was branded with Planned Parenthood. So we have demonstrated that an app branded with Planned Parenthood can be successful in Utah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, our next question comes from Brent Thompson.
Hi, Zoe. Thanks for your presentation. You mentioned briefly, your monetization strategy includes like microtransactions and ads. First, can you tell us more about that? And second, how do you, those two specific monetization strategies unavoidably compromise whatever product they're embedded in? Can you talk about are you planning on withholding some of the content, putting it behind a paywall, or what kinds of ads? How do you balance if you're forced to choose between delivering the content and engaging with the user versus monetizing the platform? Where do you come down on that compromise?
Yes, we're really happy to go more into our plan for revenue. I'll pull up this slide. Annabelle, do you want to go more into
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the base level site will have quite a bit on it of content, like 3D anatomy, right? So that we can make it visually rich and kind of the type of information young people are used to seeing. There will also be a trivia game that, you know, is just part of the site. The ways that we would enhance through microtransactions include things like you could sign up for a one-on-one with a live educator, right? So you could book a class online. Maybe you weren't able to make the one at school. Maybe you have want to customize it a little to your family. So we would be able to do that. Another one would be conversation prompts. So you could sign up for receiving through text conversation prompts to get you started talking to your child. And another one would be sort of encouraging messages, like if you want to record something or your child wants to and you want to communicate by text, as a lot of families do. This would allow you to think about what messages of encouragement you want to share with your child. We have really, in terms of our users, we've looked at, for it to, our budget, we've looked at basically about 1,000 to 5,000 regular users. Of those, 100 to 500 would need to convert to active users. And of those, 2 to 10% would need to spend money. So in terms of it being limiting, I think we are trying to appeal to a more broad audience at no cost, and then figure out how to use the revenue we're able to capture to gain the profit we need. In terms of the ads, we are talking about ad sponsor partnerships here, not banner ads. And so some of the things that we are thinking about is approaching, like really making a local approach. So going to someone like Juliana Serena, she started the Bee, but she also is a menstruation educator, and seeing if she wants to place an ad. Or, you know, the person that Zoe mentioned who's a sex therapist in town does a ton of work on Instagram. Maybe we'd want to link to have her Instagram placed as a good local resource, and she'd want to give us some small ad revenue. So I just want to emphasize that we're kind of thinking about like a Slug magazine or a Salt Lake Tribune approach to advertising, as opposed to like, you know, banner ads. And then you can see we looked at some very specific puberty products to see if they might want to advertise on our site.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Nicholas Fritz.
Hi, yeah, some of my question was already answered, but in the base website, kind of what's the content mix in terms of who you're targeting, parents versus adolescents?
So we do think parents are the primary target, although it's going to be relevant for both. The look and feel, we really want it to be our brand. We want it to be safe, compassionate, the place where people can ask the questions. We also know from public health that when you center the margins, it helps everybody. So we really want to take a race, equity, and inclusion lens to our design. We want to make sure that all youth can see themselves represented in the site. We want to show kids with braces. We want to show kids with zits. We want to show, we want to let the young people see themselves, and we want to give their parents some examples of how these conversations can go, and some really just fun tech tools to make that easier. I can also say that there's a lot of existing content we can repurpose, right? So part of why this doesn't cost a ton of money is because we have some resource from our existing Puberty Ed website, the work we have done, and the work of the field here, and the work of Planned Parenthood nationally, that we can take, and we know it's backed in science, and we know that it will, you know, be relevant for young people and their families, especially people aged 9 to 13, which is what we're really talking about here.
Thank you. All right, we have time for one more question, and it will come from Kami Palik.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to know more about like the impact measurement that you're looking at here. I understand there's broad requirements for having parents and kids engage more, but how are you specifically going to be looking at whether this is a successful launch? And then you mentioned those past education tools that you've used. Can you give an example of maybe how that was effectively used for hitting a goal previously?
For sure. Thanks for asking that question. So one example is nationally is the RU chatbot, but also the chat and text program is a pretty strong example. PPFA started a program to do education in the digital space. So if somebody chats in an urgent sexual health question, like, how do I know if I'm pregnant, I missed my period, there are drag and drop answers. That program has been evaluated extensively and shown, for example, that people are more likely to seek healthcare if they come in through the chat and text program than if they just show up on our website. And we ask feedback questions as well about their experience. Our plan locally is to leverage some of that expertise in digital research that our national organization has, and to partner with Domo for Good and start using some quick questions like, hey, glad to see you on our site. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? So we can start collecting who's using the site, how long they're staying on the site, what demographic groups can we see that they're coming from. And just, we do get monthly, like for the chat and text program, we already know monthly who's chatting in from Utah, what demographic groups they're from, and even what they're asking about. So we're already receiving and looking at this information, and that will position us well to partner with Domo locally and make sure we have good analytics for this site and also collect user experience information.
All right, thank you, Zoe and Annabelle. That was Planned Parenthood Association of Utah. Our next presenter will be Rose Maisner from Womenpreneurs.
Thank you so much, Shaylin. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. As Shaylin mentioned, my name is Rose Maisner, and I am pitching on behalf of Womenpreneurs. And we will go ahead and get started. So to start off, I'd like to acknowledge that this is not the pitch we thought we would be giving today. But the last few weeks have been yet another poignant and tragic reminder that systemic racism is wreaking havoc on Black communities, not only taking lives, but an incalculable economic toll as well. And it's time to dismantle these unjust systems. And more importantly, it's time for us to act. And at Womenpreneurs, the best way we know how to do that is by engaging our community to empower women-led businesses, and by leveraging our access to rooms like these with networks like this one, networks that unlock capital and resources and opportunity. And so rather than pitching for funding for one of our programs, we could think of no better use for this time and for the honor of being here with you all today than to invite you to join us in bringing our collective resources to bear in support of Black women-owned businesses in Utah. Black women are starting companies at an incredible rate. They are also the best equipped to solve some of our largest unmet needs, and they reinvest 90% of their money back into their communities and have a legacy of creating intergenerational wealth. And yet they are met with the greatest barriers to accessing funding. In addition to starting businesses with less capital, they receive less than 0.5% of VC funding and are 3 times less likely to be approved for a loan. At the end of the day, this represents a missed economic opportunity of $4 trillion. And now COVID is actually making things worse. Not only are Black-owned businesses being shuttered at a higher rate, but the likelihood of receiving emergency support is far less. Enough is enough. It's time that we push back against this systemic discrimination by giving social and financial capital to Black women-owned businesses, putting it in their hands. And we intend to do just that by launching a collaborative granting program that provides both immediate capital and ongoing holistic support that's designed to ensure more equitable access to the larger fundraising environment as well. A collective effort between Womenpreneurs, the Utah Black Chamber, and Beta Boom, with support and technical assistance from the Sorensen Impact Center, this program will provide Black women-owned businesses with a grant of up to $10,000, training that's designed to help female founders overcome barriers to funding and growth for their businesses, ongoing coaching, mentorship, and support, and access to networks that can open up even more channels to capital and resources in Utah and beyond. And providing financial and tactical support to Black women founders unlocks impact not only for grant recipients and the communities that their businesses are built to support, but for our larger entrepreneurial ecosystem as well. And it's really our hope that this program sustainably shifts pathways to capital and resources to be fundamentally more equal, not just to support a more diverse generation of entrepreneurs in Utah, but so that the next world-changing business is not overlooked because of systemic discrimination. So in order to address a multidimensional problem like this, we brought together a multidimensional team with combined experience of more than 20 years to co-create the solution. And each partner brings valuable expertise, networks, and resources to this collaboration, from serving the economic needs of the Black business community to closing gaps for minority founders in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and creating best practices in impact reporting and measurement. This program is designed from the outset to be enduring. And initial investment from this committee will help us to cover the fixed costs to get it up and running, and will also serve as catalytic capital to attract follow-on investment from other partners and supporters, which will ensure program sustainability. A $45,000 grant will cover the fixed operating costs and provides a minimum of 3 Black women-owned businesses with capital and 6 months of coaching and support. And in addition, we're also asking for your guidance and support as mentors, both to womenpreneurs in our long-term strategy and to the female founders in our community, including the recipients of this award. Now, we know that this is only a start and that this is a small slice of a much larger solution, but this is the slice that we know inside and out, building the capacity of female-owned businesses and providing the help and support they need to change the odds, not just for themselves, but for their communities, for our community. We invite you to join us in moving to action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rose. Our first question for the Q&A portion will be from Brent Thompson.
Great. Hi, Brent.
Hi, Rose. Good to see you.
You too.
So if it's not apparent to the rest of the crowd, like we've met. I know Rose. She's an exceptionally capable human being. Rose, tell us how it is that you came to choose this cause rather than some. I mean, you could focus your attention anywhere. Why this one?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would also like to add that Stephanie Stetler will be joining me in the Q&A portion as well, and we'll be turning on her video if it's not already. So Steph, feel free to weigh in here as well. One of the things that we've talked about for a while at Womenpreneurs is the fact that we fully acknowledge that we are a white community. Our leadership is largely white, and this is an issue that we have long known we need to address. And over the last couple of weeks, as I mentioned at the outset of this pitch, it's we have seen that reminder yet again. And I think we just came to the conclusion that enough is enough. We, as a community, as womenpreneurs, we do a lot to support female entrepreneurs, but we need to take it a step further and be more intentional in supporting minority entrepreneurs in our community. And part of that is because it unlocks, as I mentioned in the pitch, it unlocks impact that all of our communities will benefit from, and it unlocks this long-term financial sustainability for a really powerful group of entrepreneurs that have been underserved for far too long. And we recognize that not only is it time, but it's also to the benefit of our community as Utahns to be more action-oriented and to step off the sidelines right now. Steph, do you have anything to add to that?
Sorry, I was on mute there for a second. I guess I just wanted to add to that we also realized that in order to better meet our own mission of dismantling discrimination in the financial industry, we needed to bring racial justice to the forefront. We realize now with what's happened with current events lately that this isn't just going to fade out of news feeds in any time in the near future, thankfully. We're realizing this is a mass awakening nationally, and it's our time to play our role.
And I want to just add one more thing to that too. As Steph mentioned, it's our time to play a role, but not the role. So we also one of the first things we thought about when deciding that we want to move beyond like thoughts and prayers and Instagram posts to more direct action, but we want to work with the people that we know are doing this incredibly well in our communities. And so we really intentionally brought this group in particular together to leverage what we're each best at. And I'm happy to go into more detail if there are additional questions from the committee on this, but we have a long history actually of partnering with Beta Boom. We recently created a Women's Startup Academy with them that is designed to serve minority entrepreneurs who are building software companies so female founded minority entrepreneurs. They're true experts in closing gaps for minority entrepreneurs. We feel like we are the experts in closing gaps for women specifically, and then the Utah Black Chamber obviously is the number one resource hub for both new and established businesses in the Black community. And Sorensen Impact is an expert in impact reporting and measurement, and also brings this kind of global network of stakeholders to bear as well. And so in addition to feeling like it's something that we needed to do, it was also feeling like we were, again, just a small part of this larger solution. And we're so fortunate to be part of this really amazing community that has all this, the right ingredients for this recipe.
Thank you. The next question comes from Carol Hollowell.
Yeah, hi. I just was really pleased with your presentation, so thank you. I had a couple questions, but one was, how many applications do you see annually, or do you expect to see this year from women, minority women?
Yeah, that's a great question. As I mentioned, we have worked with Beta Boom on the Women's Startup Academy, and that was a nationally focused program. We received 130 applications for that, and of those 130, selected four female-run businesses to work with. In Utah, obviously, that's going to look a bit different. And one of the things that's actually been interesting in going through this process, and that's been one of the kind of initial pieces of this startup cost and the startup efforts, is that there's actually not data right now that's collected on the number of Black female-owned businesses. And the Chamber is doing a great job to step into that right now and creating a database of all Black-owned businesses. And we're working with them to figure out the number of Black women-owned businesses in particular. But that, I think, just goes to show that they have been tackling a really, really big challenge by themselves. And they're trying to serve this need in the state often alone. It's a huge scope of work, and they need the community to help them with their work a bit more and broaden the resources and support that's available. So that's one of the first things that we want to do actually with this program, is to do a better job of collecting that data and making sure that we have all the right channels established too, to get into to get this application into the hands of the communities that we believe would benefit from it. And so working with the Chamber, and then also leveraging our other partnerships with groups that are trusted leaders in a number of communities of color in Utah.
Right, and I think part of the second part of that question would be, monitoring the success, because typically you're going to see that if they're not getting the funding, they're also not getting the mentorship or the support. So how do you have some kind of a database or something that is keeping track of these women and knowing if they need extra help?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's again something that we have the framework and the infrastructure built for that already, because we've been doing it in our other programs. And so it's and Steph can speak a little bit more to our impact metrics and measurement. This is where also we're really fortunate though to work with Sorensen, who is an expert in this area, to help us take our existing frameworks and then match them with the needs of this particular community, and make sure that we have designed it with a lot of rigor and strength, so that we are creating the not only targeting the right outcomes, but then measuring them appropriately as well. So Steph, did you want to weigh in on some of the metrics and measurement we plan to look at?
Yeah, this is just a first stab. We really intend to dive into this and flesh this out better with Sorensen impact support. But the aim between these initial output and outcome projections is that we want to both engage Black female founders and sustain their engagement over time, and then actually see material change in their influence over time. So that might be growing your business by 30% in 2 years. That might be expanding your business into a new market. That might be seeing better or expanded leadership development beyond her business leadership into other civic areas. As I mentioned, we do look forward to working this out better with Sorensen. And as a collective of those 4 partners, prepare individualized support plans for each female founder. So that's not just something that Womenpreneurs would say, hey, we think that you need this training. It's something that we would do as that entire steering committee. What does a holistic support program look like for each individual? And Womenpreneurs would take the lead in ensuring that program is executed.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our last question is going to come from Nicholas Fritz.
Hi guys, a hell of a pivot and really exciting work. Congratulations already. question about, well, I guess two questions. One, what's the timeline for sort of getting up and running? And then two, does Womenpreneurs have experience in kind of running a similar grant funding program already?
Very good questions. You did this, as I'm sure is evident, has come together really quickly. And I think that's both a function of what we're seeing in our society right now, and that need for urgency and a move to action, but also a function of the fact that we, we're in, and I think this speaks so well of Utah too, that we have this incredible community of support, and then when something happens, we act. And so, the exact timeline is still being developed as we speak. But the idea is that we want to put this program together as quickly as possible, so that we can begin to provide direct services and support as quickly as possible. On the others piece of your question, the grant piece of it is not something that Womenpreneurs has done before, but our other partners have. And then where we have expertise and again, going back to that program that we've created with Beta Boom, we're really good at the part about pulling together not just a program, but a really individualized plan of action for individual entrepreneurs. So Steph, can you go to the implementation piece of things? Yeah. So the Utah Black Chamber is actually going to be in charge of administering the grant itself and dealing with that piece of it. And then Womenpreneurs, with the support of the Black Chamber and Beta Boom, will be managing the program participation. So the funds will be administered, and Womenpreneurs is going to take the lead on that kind of design piece to create the holistic solution that Steph was talking about. Does that answer your question, Nick?
Yes, thanks, Rose.
Thank you. And that is all of the time that we have for this Q&A. Thank you so much, Rose and Stephanie, for your presentation.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Up next, we have the exciting opportunity to vote in the audience choice poll. I'm sharing my screen with you again, and we've provided an audience choice tool for you to use as you select your audience choice. So we just ask that you take this as an opportunity to learn more about allocating your dollars in the most effective way and analyzing the organizations that you choose to give to. Here is my shared screen. Haley, are you able to start that poll?
And for those on the investment committee, Shaylin has emailed you the link to the Zoom where we'll be doing our deliberations. And I think she also posted the link in the chat. So if we want to start migrating over to that, we can begin the deliberations. And I think Shaylin and Alex will, as folks are submitting the poll, do you want to just do the little wrap up?
Yeah, why don't we just want to thank the 6 finalists. These are great presentations, really exciting to see the good work that's being done in the community. And thank you again to Morgan Stanley, who with their support, they've been supporting us since the beginning of this. And then Shaylin, did you have any final thoughts before we embark on our next piece?
Yes, do we have the poll results in?
I think while we're waiting for the poll results, we also, we welcome donations to run this program. So if you're interested in supporting these organizations and our work, we'd love to hear from you. And Shaylin will wait and hear from the poll.
Great. It looks like there's still a few in our audience that are voting, so I'll just give them another minute or so.
And, for the audience, you just follow our Community Foundation on social media, and that's where we will announce the awardees. And sometimes we do come to a decision day of, and other times it takes some follow-up meetings and some more deliberation. But so stay tuned, but there will be a decision. You can also subscribe to our newsletter on our website, and we'll announce any of the awardees through the newsletter as well.
All right. How are we coming on those poll numbers? Looks like we're at 92% of answers in. All right, and I've received a question as well, and we will email out a recording of this webinar. You can also find it on our Facebook page. We did stream it live, so it will be there at the Community Foundation of Utah Facebook page as well. All right, and we are excited to announce that we have all of the votes in for the Audience Choice Award. And Womenpreneurs is our Audience Choice Award for the Spring 2020 Social Investors Forum. Congratulations.
Thank you all so much. That means the world, especially considering how quickly this has come together. And we look forward to working with many of you on this project in the coming days and weeks and months. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you again to our 6 finalists for your compelling pitches and the work you do in our community. Thank you to Morgan Stanley for your financial support of this initiative. Thank you to our investment committee for your time and expertise. And thank you to everyone who joins us today in the audience. We could not do this without any of you. If you enjoyed attending this event today, we welcome you to make a donation either to the Social Investors Forum or to our finalists directly. And our investment committee, as Alex mentioned, is now adjourned to a separate call for their discussion, and we will announce awardees via our website, newsletter, and social media. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.